Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey for the last 6 years. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, big thank you to Justice Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind our logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror and Halloween genre, but does great commission pieces of any type, especially pets. Just great pets. Anyway, tonight, I'm really excited. I mean, you guys will notice, remember, I played a rerun last week with the amazing Laura DiDio to segue in for tonight's episode. And, I'm sure she's going to get asked this all the time. Did you get paranormal experiences because of Amityville? Because she was the reporter who broke the story. And she was, in contact with all of these people who essentially were involved. She, knew most of them, worked with phenomenal researchers. And, I'm sure if you listen to the show, you'll get the whole gist of it. And I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit. But, that wasn't her only paranormal experience. It started before that. I'm sure that amped things up a little bit. But the point is her story and her journey into the paranormal had always been there, and it continued long after that. So without further ado, the wonderful Laura DiDio. Hello.
Hi, Michelle. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, pleasure. It's always a pleasure. We always have so much fun when you're on. So Amelia's just been sick and she's like, oh, God, I'm missing it again. It's like, sorry.
Well, that'll be an excuse to come back a third time.
And you're always welcome. You have an open door with us anytime. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming back to the show. I mean, there's been so many times, even after a show, where we sort of get talking a little bit afterwards. And there's like so many other incredible things that you have experienced. And I mean, most people have come to know you, I'm sure, from interviews and such with, about Amityville, because it's such a high profile story. But your story began
that has spanned 50 years at this point almost, which is amazing that we're still, talking about that. And
it's
yes.
true. It's completely it has staying power. And I often wonder, look, we'll talk about it as we go along, because I had a couple of questions about that, along with the whole Annabelle thing. It led me to think of something else about Amityville itself. So we'll get to that. Where I would actually like to start, because we haven't done it before, is I like to start with humble beginnings. Have you had any first experiences? What was it like growing up as young Laura when it came to, having paranormal experiences and such? And then we're just going to move on.
Sure, absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, like everybody else, my journey has a beginning.
Yes.
And that starts very early on.
Yes.
And I would say every family has a ghost story. So as a little kid, well, first of all, my mother was psychic, although it was not something that she advertised.
Right.
You know, she wasn't trying to do that, but you'd hear the stories, growing up. But in this case, my grandmother, I'm Irish and Italian. So on the Italian side of my family, my Italian grandfather, who died years before I was born, there's a story about that. My grandparents had 11 kids, 10 of whom survived, including my dad. And so they had a big house.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing the stories as a kid from my aunts and uncles. So my grandfather, Anthony, had a wonderful death. He had a wonderful life too. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he liked to eat a big bowl of spaghetti and meatballs and then go out and feed bread to the birds in the yard and then take an afternoon nap, as many people did when they ate their meals in the middle of the day. So he did that one day in September of 1949, went upstairs, took a nap, and my aunts heard what they thought was snoring, and it wasn't. He had passed away in his sleep. So what they heard was, I guess, the traditional death rattle. So obviously it was a big shock to everybody, but what a nice way to go.
Yes.
Eating your favorite meal, you're not ill, anything. So, but a few days later, after they had the funeral and everything, my Aunt Antoinette was starting to go up the stairs to the second floor bedroom. And she looks up and she sees her father's shade or spirit.
Wow.
As if he was there. Needless to say, my aunt was dissuaded from going up there for a few days. She didn't even want to go upstairs to sleep in the bedroom for a few days. So we heard that story. And of course, at my grandmother's house, the kids go over and play, and there were a lot of grandchildren, as you can imagine, with 10 kids.
Yeah.
And they had a Ouija board, and we'd play with the Ouija board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you'd have and the thing would move. You would feel it move. On the other side of my family, the Irish side, my Irish grandmother was born in County Kerry, Ireland, and only emigrated to the States when she was 25. So they believe in fairies, and there are in Kerry and Limerick and many of the counties there, they have the fairy forts or the ring forts, and there's a lot of superstitions there. And with that, so my mother, when my grandmother would go back to Ireland, and she took my mother with her as a 2.5-year-old the first time, again, my mother was very psychic, and at that point, they stayed in the old homestead, but my Irish great-grandfather had passed away. And they had one of those thatched cottages, stone, big. It was not fancy. It was a lot of land, a lot of farm animals, but not a lot of house. It was basically 2 rooms, none of the modern conveniences.
Right.
When my grandmother went back, she was treated like royalty because, of course, during World War II, she had been sending stuff to the family back in Ireland. Sugar, you name it, stuff. She would send back shoes, 1 shoe at a time. So my mother, being 2.5, was spoiled by all of her aunts and uncles.
Yes.
And my mother starts coming up with this story. She started telling my grandmother, her mother, and my great-grandmother, and all the aunts and uncles. She started talking one day about, the nice man who came to talk to her while she was out running around in the fields. And they just figured it was like a local person.
Yeah.
And turns out, what is he? But they didn't see anybody. And my mother would say, well, no, you can see him. He's right there. And he comes to see me and talk to me. What does he look like? And the person she described was my deceased great-grandfather.
Wow.
So my mother, they knew from an early age, had what the Irish typically call as the sight. Now, fast forward a few years, of course, as a kid, when I heard the story about the Italian grandfather and his spirit standing at the top of the stairs, that was, ooh, doo-doo-doo. We never saw that. And we're looking at poking around as kids in all the nooks and crannies. So I had a fascination with that from an early age. But by the time I was about 9 or 10, my mother brought home a book, The Ghost Hunter by Hans Holzer, who was, of course, one of the deans of paranormal investigations. So I was a voracious reader, even as a child. So I picked this up and, even though it was probably above my grade level, I was fascinated by this. And you could get the little Dell horoscope books for $0.25. But the thing that really set me on the path was I started babysitting for a couple down the block.
Yes.
And they were in their mid-20s. And they had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I would babysit for them on Saturday afternoons and I would make the princely sum of $1.
Ooh.
Which is,
I remember those days.
Yeah, which was a lot. And so I would be carrying these books around about ghosts, and it turns out that the lady that I babysat for, her name was Gladys. She lived she was originally from the next town over, Flushing, Queens, and her parents had inherited her grandmother's house. And it was a big old house in North Flushing. And so when I started talking to her about the ghost story, she said, oh, my grandmother's house, now my parents' house, which Gladys had grown up in after because her parents moved in with the grandmother. So there was an overlap from the time Gladys's grandmother passed away and, she was there with the parents. So apparently after Mrs. Kudlicka, that was the woman's name, she's Hungarian, had passed away, things started happening in the house. On Mrs. Kudlicka's, the anniversary of her death and her birthday. And back in those days, a lot of people would make soup and they would put in marrow bones into the pots. And when you boiled the marrow bones in an aluminum, stainless steel pot, whatever, it would bang against the pot and it would make a lot of noise. It was a racket.
Yeah.
So they started noticing on Grandma Kudlicka's birthday and anniversary of her passing, they would hear a lot of noise in the house. And besides the banging that sounded a lot like, soup on the kettle, bones in the kettle, they would also hear doors opening and closing, footsteps, etc. And at first they said, okay, Gladys's mother was trying to say, oh, I just have soup on. But Mom, Gladys would say to her as a young kid, you don't have the soup on. There's nothing cooking. This is just this. So then what the family would start to do would be to leave the house on those days. However, when Gladys hit, I guess she was about 12 or 13, puberty, which is a time, when some of these things can amp up.
Correct.
For poltergeist activity. I guess she must have had her grandmother's bedroom or one of the bedrooms. So she told me she was going to sleep one night and she sees a specter at the foot of the bed. So of course, first thing she does is pull the covers over, close her eyes, shut the eyes tight, and then, a few minutes later, peep out, see if it was still there. And this started to become a very frequent occurrence. So after a while, but she said she never had a feeling of threat. After she got used to it the first few times, then she'd look and become more curious. And then she saw the specter would move towards the closet. And I think she might have sensed it was her grandmother but
Mhm.
it wasn't like she could see a full-on form as though you and I are looking at each other. But she said the specter would point towards the closet
Mhm.
door and disappear into the closet. So daylight came, and finally Gladys got very curious about this. So she goes into the closet, and I guess she had a flashlight, and she's poking around, and one of the floorboards in the corner of the closet was loose. So she pries it open, and there was
Mm.
a little box, and in the box was a black velvet pouch, and it contained uncut diamonds. Contained cut
Wow.
diamonds, loose diamonds. So
Wow.
after that, she didn't see the specter as much anymore, but they all knew when Grandma Cudlica was around. So of course, when I heard this story, I said, "Oh, can we go over? Can we go over to your mom's house? Can we go over there and see?"
Mhm.
And by this time, Gladys had become good friends with my mother,
Yeah, yeah.
and I kept badgering everybody. My mother says, "Oh, Laura, stop, stop. No, 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 no." That was, you could tell I was a budding reporter even then. "No, no, I want to go. I want to go to the haunted house." And
Right.
Gladys was saying, "Well, we haven't really heard Grandma as much
Mhm.
in recent years. So, things have calmed down, etc. Well, I want to go anyway." So finally it's arranged, and we go over with my mother, myself. My father, of course, was poo-pooing all this. He just,
Yeah.
childish fantasy.
Yeah.
And we get there, and no sooner did we get there, about 10, 15 minutes, and everybody's chatting, having tea or whatever, cookies. And we start to hear doors opening and closing upstairs,
Hmm.
footsteps, and everybody's looking, what is this? Then we started to hear the banging. So,
Grandma's really amping it up for you.
well, I think, here's what I think.
Mm.
Okay. And Mrs. She was, Mrs. Kudlica was very much saying, "Wow, this hasn't happened in a long time."
Mhm.
I think Grandma was attracted to my mother's psychic energy and was
Okay.
putting on a show for because my mother could feel things. So that was the first time
Mhm.
that my mother really, in a big way,
Yes.
fessed up
Her
to this
the
stuff.
ability. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And you didn't
And
talk about things like that back in the day.
well, my mother didn't want anybody to know because she
Mhm.
figured that they would laugh at her. And
Yes.
she was very sensitive about these things. But my mother had had a couple of things. Number one, when she was 3 or 4, well, besides the incidents over in Ireland when
Mhm.
she was there visiting, she had a swing set in the backyard of her house. And she said she would swing on the swing, and this is at 3 or 4, and she said she would start to say to herself, "Who am I? Who am I?" At 3 or 4, and it was almost like a self-hypnosis ritual, and she said she would feel herself falling
Hmm.
into like a void, like going back, and then she would get scared and pull herself out of it. But
Mhm.
anybody who's listened to Yeats and any of the poets from, who are from the Order of the Golden Dawn,
Yes.
knows that they'll tell you at the very beginning, very young children still can remember those past experiences,
Mhm.
whether you want to say past lives or while they were still in spirit.
Mhm.
And so can very elderly people as they are getting ready to transition to the other side.
Mhm.
So my mother would stop herself, but she also said that she went to the Woolworths one time, 5 and 10 cent store, and she was buying nail polish, which was a big deal back in the for a young
Yeah.
kid in the 50s, and she was giggling, and she got to the counter to pay for it, and the cashier said to her, you're going to marry a man with the initials JD who was born in January.
Huh. Wow.
And my mother's 14 or 15 at the time, and I can guarantee she did not have any prospects.
Yeah.
And of course, she married my dad, who was born in January. And then the other thing that happened to my mom, she had somebody read her tea leaves in a teacup the night, a couple of nights before she and my dad got married. And my mother turned it over and she says, I didn't necessarily believe I was going to see anything, but she said it spelled out just as if I was writing on a blackboard, love in the bottom of the cup. So clearly my mother was attracting this energy, and that only sharpened and piqued my interest in ghost stories and things like this. So who would have thought, 10 years later, after she first brought in the book by Hans Holzer, that I would be interviewing him. So as I continued on my way, I was able, I was a student at Fordham University, and I had a radio show called Dimension. So unlike everybody else who wanted to play music, and I love music, don't get me wrong, I wanted a talk show. So I would invite people like Ed and Lorraine Warren on. I had Uri Geller on. I had, Hans Holzer.
Yeah. All
of these people who were very, very well known in the New York metropolitan area and beyond. And I know David Copperfield, for example, when I had Uri Geller on, I had a friend of mine come into the studio with me, and one of my close friends from high school, and she was going to Case Western Reserve, where she was studying material sciences and metallurgy. So totally scientific. And I said, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Uri Geller. Come on. And of course, I brought the requisite number of broken watches, spoons, etc.
Yeah.
So, and I know David Copperfield has, debunked Uri Geller and things like this, but I can tell you, sitting in that studio, so my friend Diana, the metallurgist, the engineer, the scientist, the practical one, was sitting in the corner, never came into contact with Uri.
Yeah.
She was sitting there and she was holding some keys in her hand, and all of a sudden I saw her from the corner of my eye. The keys are bending and the watches started going. So it may be magic, it may be a trick, but I saw that happen. So then I would ask Hans Holzer and Ed and Lorraine Warren and other people. And also at the time on Long Island, you had Raymond Buckland.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Buckland Museum for Witchcraft and Magic. And one of the classes I took at Fordham was in Witchcraft and Magic. That was part of, you had to take 5 courses in religion and philosophy. So I went out there and I interviewed him. And of course, Hans Holzer was working with Ethel Johnson Myers and Sybil Leek.
Yes.
So that led me to my next incursion. One of the things that Hans Holzer did for Channel 5 back in 1968, good 6-7 years before Amityville, he had done a documentary on the Cafe Bazaar.
Yes.
Cafe Bazaar was in the West Village. It was a discotheque, and you have to figure it was the 60s, boy, and people, the West Village, you had hippies, but you had people dressing, in a lot of, very flamboyant clothes, but velvet and ruffles and things like this. So the Cafe Bazaar was a discotheque.
Yeah.
And people would go there and they would, be out on the floor, and people might have been toking up or what have you.
Yeah.
And they started to notice, they would see a man with very piercing eyes in period costume, which in some ways was not too different from some of the garb that they were wearing. I mean, people didn't think it was so out of the ordinary, but black black coat, white ruffles, and then they'd turn around from the dance floor and poof, he was gone. But people didn't know if it was because, they were dropping acid or,
Yeah.
toking up. So, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
started to get, the word started to get around because he was just disappearing and it was otherworldly. So Hans Holzer went in with Sybil Leek. They did this big documentary on it, and the ghost of Aaron Burr came through. And it turns out that the Cafe Bazaar in the West Village was the former home, or more specifically, the stable, Aaron Burr's stables.
Wow.
So that was what came through with Sybil Leek. So fast forward a few years after Amityville, and it had changed hands. It was no longer a discotheque. Then it had become something else. And by the way, the building was bought by and is owned by today NYU, and it is used for storing a lot of the NYU law records and things like that from their law school. So everything old is new again.
Yes.
And so when I was at CNN back in the early 80s, I decided I was doing a series on the paranormal and psychic phenomenon, and I dredged everybody up. I shouldn't say dredge. That's terrible verb here. But I decided, okay, I was going to interview the Warrens again about Amityville and some of the other things that they were doing, the Conjuring and etc. And I wanted to go back down to the Cafe Bazaar, which was no longer the Cafe Bazaar.
Yeah.
And you could get in there and wander around, and it is very spooky, because what was happening was, from the 60s to the 80s, now you've got a whole new generation of students.
Yeah.
And it wasn't who didn't necessarily know the history.
Yeah.
But they would have to go down there into those stacks, and maybe they were doing some research and looking at, the old things. And people started on their own saying, oh, I got a queasy feeling here.
Yeah.
Something's there, and something just beyond, your peripheral vision. So we went in to do this and just, walk around at first and get the feel of things. And it's always interesting. Of course, I felt like I was I had all the sensitivity of a pet rock, because I'm not feeling anything. I mean, it's easy to spook yourself in these situations.
It is.
But one of our producers was very, he didn't know he was sensitive to it.
Yeah.
But he was. And he said, hey, it's chilly down. Why is it so chilly down here? And not knowing that these cold spots, or what he was feeling, could be one of the first manifestations of things.
Yeah.
And then he had to go do something with the equipment, but he came back and he got spooked because there was Aaron Burr, or what we showed him the pictures.
Yes.
Yes. Not Alexander Hamilton.
Yes.
They but who was killed in the duel. But so he's still down there. People are still reporting this. And by the way, at Fordham University, which has been around since the 1800s, and they have tunnels down there, and they had a seismic station. We had our own ghosts, the White Lady in Martyr's Court, and you'd investigate these things. And of course, somebody was always going up to the bell tower when they weren't supposed to. And there were a few deaths. In fact, there was one recently in the last 5 or 6 years. It's a senior rite of passage. You go into Keating Hall, go all the way up to the bell tower where the clock is. And somebody did fall out and unfortunately died. That was about the third or fourth person. Wow. So all along, I was seeking these things out, and I was interviewing all these people because, I mean, look, New York, come on, you can't get any better than this. And at the time, especially in the post 1960s psychedelic era,
Oh, yeah.
okay, you did have, there was so much going on. You had psychic street fairs and festivals, people reading auras, Curlian photography, all that leading edge things. So I was able to avail myself of all of that. And I think, and we should say, look, everybody has psychic abilities. Just like everybody can learn to play chess, but you're not going to be a grandmaster. Or not everybody who plays basketball is going to be Michael Jordan.
Correct.
But if you work at it and you're exposed to it quite a bit, you can bring out your innate abilities to the best of your ability. So in my case, what that has meant over the decades, I mean, I was nothing like my mother or my friend Vicki Monroe, who we've had on here.
Yes.
Who's her psychic abilities are just for talking with either departed spirits, people who have been here before, or just spirits who were never in this realm. It's off the charts.
Yeah.
So I think some of that, plus my interest, and comes down and has come out over the years. So the way it has manifested itself with me is I will suddenly get a bolt out of the blue about something, like I have to do something, an impulse. And in recent years, this happened back in 2006. I was sitting here, right here in my office, and I was writing in my other life, as a reporter, and I've done everything from cops and crime and the occult, but political and police corruption, you name it, science, health. But I have specialized in high technology over the past 25 years or so. So I was writing a paper on IBM servers. Couldn't be further away from all
paranormal.
Of the paranormal. And I'm sitting here and the thought jumps into my head, I have to call Lorraine Warren. Now, we all have a feeling that we get, comes into our head, I haven't talked to so-and-so. I should really give them a call. This was not that. This was, I have to call Lorraine Warren, and I have to call her right now. Wasn't anything bad, but it was just
the urgency.
A definite impulse. And I hadn't talked to Lorraine for about a year. So I just picked up the phone, called her, and she and Ed Warren used to answer their phones all the time. They had an answering machine. So I said, Lorraine, hi, how are you? It's Laura DiDio. Laura, hi, how are you doing? I'm good. I said, it's the funniest thing. You just popped into my head and I felt like I had to call you. So she says, I'm glad you did, because at that point, Ed had had a stroke and was at home and she was caring for him. He was, he was bedridden. He couldn't really talk, but Lorraine said she communicated with him. And so, of course, we were on the phone for about 2.5 hours. And it was the middle of the afternoon here on the East Coast. I would say it was probably about 2, 3 o'clock, anywhere from 1 to 3 when we were talking. So I said, of course, we talked about Amityville and all of the things that happened there and the cases she was working on and how was Ed doing. And I said, listen, we need to have lunch. And I said, I can come down to you, obviously, and I can bring something, if you can't get out of the house. And she's okay. I said, okay, so I'll call you next week and we'll make a date. So several hours later in the evening, I start seeing my inbox fill up with Have You Heard? George Lutz had a heart attack and passed away in Las Vegas. And I looked, and they said he had the heart attack out in Las Vegas, probably at around noon. And he was having a heart attack at the exact time that Lorraine and I were on the phone talking about all of this. I said, okay, this is not a coincidence. I have had many coincidences. Okay, so for example, big coincidence, Danny Lutz, he was the oldest of the 3 Lutz children who lived in the Amityville house for the infamous ill-fated 28 days. After he ran away and came back to New York when he was 16 or 17, he ended up being a UPS driver. And he ended up being a UPS driver in my hometown. My mother answered the door one day, as did friends of mine, and she saw the name tag and she knew who it was. She didn't say anything. That's a coincidence.
Yeah.
But what happened with Lorraine that day was not a coincidence as far as I was concerned, because I had a real compulsion to get on the phone. So I called Lorraine up the next day. I said, Lorraine, did you hear about George Lutz? She says, yeah, because she had been getting calls from the news media. And I said, Lorraine, you remember when I got on the phone with you yesterday? I said, Lorraine, you just popped into my head, and I felt like I had to call you right then and there. Couldn't wait. She says, I know. So to Lorraine, it was, yeah, okay, this is like
business as usual.
Yeah. I mean, to her, that was an ordinary occurrence.
Yeah.
But when it's something, so I find that this has happened to me any one of a number of times when I can sense things that are close. And I think when you've gone through an experience, as I did over the years with Amityville, and witnessed things, okay, and you've been involved with these people, that really makes you more sensitive to it and brings it out.
I agree with you. I think if you are in an environment with high levels of activity, and you're living it in every day, maybe it comes down to like a survival thing as well, just having to tap into it. You become very accustomed to feeling that type of an energy. And then when you work around people or spend time around people who are exactly like that, it's easy to fall into it as well. So I mean, for me, I've always had it, but I also find that being away from all of it, you became a little bit lax. Like, it was just very easy for me to push it aside. And then when I got into, because I've been like that my whole life, but when getting into it professionally, on a more professional, regular basis, and all of a sudden it's just like flipping a switch, everything just comes back on, just being in the right environments.
Yes, and it's also being receptive to it. Don't forget, we have a lot of white noise.
Oh, yes.
As people in our busy daily lives.
Yes.
Oh, listen, I have to balance the checkbook. I have to pay this bill. You pick the kids up from soccer, whatever you're doing, but everybody's juggling things. Oh, take the dog to the vets. Meet this deadline for work. Do this, right? Whatever your job is. And so that can drown out a lot of those abilities, those sixth sense abilities. On the other hand, there are people who don't know they're sensitive until it hits until something happens. So very, very interesting situation. As I said, when I was at CNN, just as when I was at Channel 5, I was producing. I decided I was going to produce and like a 2-week series on paranormal and various aspects of psychic phenomenon. So of course I had Ed and Lorraine Warren on again, but this time I wanted to do something a little bit different. I had interviewed this woman, Evelyn, who had been Edgar Cayce's secretary. Edgar Cayce was the sleeping prophet who died in 1945.
Yes.
That was interesting. So I was talking to her, and I went down to the ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, which was down in Virginia Beach at the time. But the other thing I decided to do was interview, but not just interview, but do a sort of event, a mini event with a hypnotist who specialized in past life regression.
Mm-hmm.
So he came into CNN's New York studio, which at the time when we first started out was in the ground floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
Wow.
And we had one big studio, and then there were a couple of offices up in the back, and I had the office in the back. So I said, okay, well, we're going to need people for you to hypnotize. So I ran around the newsroom that day and was just grabbing whoever was available and in there. So we had about, I guess 8 or 9 people. And this fellow had a tape. I had seen some of the videos he had done with some of his appearances where he would have people come up on stage and he would hypnotize them. And one thing that he did was he had a bunch of young guys up there, and he said, okay, he was hypnotizing each of them to say, that they were Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah.
So he went through the thing, and the tape was actually pretty entertaining, because some people were like, shaking it off. But some people that he hypnotized, some of the people were really under and got into it and started, it was almost like they were acting in a Star Trek episode. I am Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. And they, so I don't know if they were faking it or what, but it was entertaining to watch. So what he was going to do, the object of this exercise, was to do like a group hypnosis. We were in a sort of darkened room in this office. We're sitting around in a circle, and he was guiding us. And he was getting us, okay, so just relax, just close your eyes, think, and just let whatever thoughts come in. Now, some of this can just be imagination, okay? But he was going around to each person when we were in this relaxed state and saying, okay, now I'm going to guide you. And he would start with the highlight reel of your life. So he would start out with people, with each person. You were a young person, then he'd jump ahead a few years and finally bring you up to the time when you were going to cross over. So one of our producers, a woman named Anne, who had worked on 60 Minutes, she was a very no-nonsense person. She came out and she said she was a milkmaid in the 15th century over in England. Wow. Now, this was just, you could just say this is a funny exercise. But 3 of the people who were in there, and one person especially, he was one of the associate producers for Lou Dobbs, the late Lou Dobbs show, Moneyline.
Yeah.
So again, it's money, finances, and he didn't have any, I just grabbed him. He had none of these people had any prior affinity for any of this. I just grabbed them and said, that's how they're doing this, lark.
Yeah.
So this fellow, Steve, who was African-American, he was about my age. He regressed him. And it turns out that this man was also, that he, in his last life, had been also an African-American man living in, was it North Carolina or South Carolina? And he got married and he had 2 kids, a son and a daughter. He was widowed early, so that was sort of, an unhappy event, and he was a farrier, a blacksmith. So, but when the hypnotist put him under, Steve went under, I mean, out.
Wow.
I mean, sleeping, he had to wake him up and start all over again. So,
Mm.
and that's when this story emerges that he had lived in, and the guy had only died in the 1950s. So this
Wow.
is sort of
Very
interesting.
recent. Yeah.
Well, no, but this was the only one. So his life was blighted by the fact that his two kids did not get along.
Mm-hmm.
And that really upset him.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he brought him up to the time of his death. He was the only ones when Steve was put under that came out with the full name.
Yeah.
Give it, first name, surname,
Mm-hmm.
and the town where he died and the year, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
And we looked it up afterwards, and this had happened. And of course, the thing I said to Steve was, because the mind is a very fertile ground. Have you ever been to, the Carolinas? Do you know anybody there? Could you have seen this in a newspaper clipping, in an obituary, and suddenly it went from, the back of your head and pops out into your conscious? No. So that was very interesting.
Did he go back to try to find his gravesite, for example, or that of his wife? Like if he had a name?
Well, yeah, we found it. We found the guy.
Wow.
Yes,
Crazy.
and that, he was the only one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now catch this: Reese Schoenfeld was the original president at CNN.
Right.
And he was a no-nonsense fellow, and he had his daughter, Ellen, who was just 18. He had her working there for a summer job that first year, and she's very cute, sweet-faced girl. And she was one of the people we pulled in to do this. She's just 18. And Ellen, if you're out there, I don't even know if you remember this story. So she went under. Okay. And again, this is an 18-year-old girl born and brought up in the city, Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I think when they first started, Reese was also down in Atlanta, which was the headquarters. But so she goes under, and turns out she's a young girl in the Old West.
Jeez.
In the Old West. And she started out and she wanted to become a teacher or what have you. But somehow or another, she ends up falling in love with an itinerant cowboy who breaks her heart. And he was she started out very respectable. And then as the hypnotist was jumping ahead year by year, so this guy dumps her, abandons her, leaves her there, and she's now working in a saloon. Dance hall girl and probably prostitution. And she's totally hypnotized. She's totally under. I still have the tapes, by the way.
Yeah. She's
crying in this hypnotic state. I mean, waterworks, tears streaming down her face. She's become an alcoholic, dissolute, life. She has no hope. So he brings her up to the time when he says, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. You can cross over. So she comes out of it and she says, what did I say? She, why am I, swimming in her face? Why do I have tears on my face?
Yeah,
and then she sort of remembered it. And I'm saying to myself, I probably don't want to put this on in the story.
Yeah.
Because it's the Reese Schoenfeld's daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not going to go over too well, but shock. But the one that was also shocking was another guy who had he was a news assistant. His father had been was a very well-known reporter and a good Irish Catholic, because Mark was one of like 10 kids. Okay. Really fun, tall, nice looking guy, happy-go-lucky, very, very energetic, would always help people out, which is not always what happens in a newsroom.
Mhm.
So his story, and you can't make this stuff up. Again, he just did this as a lark. He was around. I said, come on in, do this. The hypnotist puts him under and starts out, and he was living in the 1800s in London, and he came from a family, modest means, that they were not poor, but it wasn't the upper or the posh classes, but he wanted to be a barrister or an attorney. So he had had a pretty good life, and I guess he's in his early 20s. And as this story unfolded, he meets a girl who is from an upper class, the posh set, the Doonesbury set, or Bloomsbury, and he wants to marry her, and her father is a judge. And the father is not happy about this match. So he had to overcome the family opposition because he was not of the same class, but apparently they got married. He became a lawyer or a barrister himself. They had 3 kids. So then the funny part that happens in this, when the hypnotist is bringing him up to the part where he's dying. So he had a pretty happy life, happy marriage, kids, the whole thing, brings him up to the part where he's dying. And I guess he's in the hospital or he's in his bed at home, whichever. And he's saying, well, what's going on? All of a sudden you hear him saying, what's going on? Why is everybody crying? Hey, it's getting dark in here. The lights are going out.
That's crazy.
Just experiencing his death. And but the way he was telling it, it was almost, it was making me, I really had to stifle the giggles. And he woke them up. So those are 3 separate things. And nobody in that room had ever been exposed to this stuff before. I mean, they were doing it, funny. And so, but people were very, very surprised by their reaction. And in my case, I was a man in my last life, and I don't know what my name was, but my wife's name was Matilda, and I was living in the Old West. And of course, I love the Old West and horses, and I was killed in an Indian attack with an arrow through my head. So whatever that means.
Yeah.
But mine was not as vivid as, but watching other people, but I certainly had, this is what came out. So you might say, well, these are nice little stories.
Yeah.
But I did, Amityville, of course, was a thread in my life. A lot of things came out from Amityville, the DeFeo stuff. And one thing I haven't talked about as much about Amityville, and this is again in the 1983, 84. After Amityville, there were a bunch of kids on Long Island, and this has been written about. There was a documentary about it. There's a kid called Ricky Casso, Long Island kid. He's 17 years old. And a bunch of these kids, they were stoners. They were, dropping acid and having rituals out in Northport, which is not, Amityville's on the South Shore, Northport is on the other thing. But at that point, Long Island is 150 miles long. At its widest point, it's 25 miles. But it's not, that's only at its widest point. You're only going across Island. It's probably 3 or 4 miles, although it's heavily trafficked. But there were woods out there. And they started, again, they were aware of Raymond Buckland, and the Museum for Witchcraft and Magic, and they thought, oh, we're going to do black magic and satanic rituals, self-styled stuff, to be sure. So they started hanging out in these woods and doing that, and it got more and more wild. So this Ricky Casso, who, and he's been written about, and there's also you can look it up. It's basically a tale of drugs, devil worship, and unfortunately murder. And Ricky Casso ended up during one of these rituals. He killed one of his best friends, Gary Lowers, who was, a younger kid he was a follower, not a leader. And that was in July 1984. And they buried this kid who was only 17. He was a high school dropout. They buried him in this, what they called Azteca, because they had been talking about like the Aztec temples and things like this and rituals.
Yeah.
So, but before that happened, and this kid was determined to die, he had a death wish. He came out, he had been visiting the Amityville house, and he had somehow at one point gotten into the house. I guess he knew somebody who knew somebody.
Yeah.
And he came from a really nice family. But he was doing, unfortunately, a lot of angel dust, PCP, weed, you name it, he was doing it. And he had a death wish. But before these murders happened, he was very, very interested in the Amityville story and going out there. Anything that had to do with demonic stuff, Satanism. And he showed up at my office one day to see me. And, at this point, this is before the murders, so I didn't know anything about him. And they just said, oh, Laura, you have a visitor here. And you could tell, he's spacey. You could tell he's high as a kite, and they were, wild look in his eyes. And he wanted to talk to me about Amityville.
So this is before the DeFeo murders.
No, this was after the DeFeo murders and after the Lutzes. So
okay,
this is early 1984.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, but he was obsessed with this even at the age of 16 or 17. So that whole Amityville thing, and he and these friends were having these rituals out in the Azteca woods, and then in June of that year, 84, he stabbed, and a third person held this Gary down. They got into an argument over drugs, and he stabbed him 30 times. And what happened after that, it's really, again, it's very gruesome because they buried the friend's body, Gary Lauer's body, in a shallow grave. And for weeks after this, the kid had been a runaway. He had run away from his home in Northport. And all the kids in the area who knew about it at the high school, what have you, because Ricky Casso was known to a lot of people, they knew that they had just buried this kid Gary's body in the Azteca woods.
Jeez.
And so enough of the story got around that finally one of the teenage girls at the high school, she had heard about it, and she made an anonymous call to the police department. And they went out with the dogs on the 4th of July in the woods. And this was right behind Main Street. And Main Street in Northport, it's a beautiful town with, the harbor is there, boats. You got a beautiful Main Street, very provincial. But the woods were behind there. and they took the cadaver dogs out on the 4th of July, and the dog went crazy. He was howling and sniffing, and he found enough of the decayed flesh.
Mm-hmm.
There was a fingerprint, there was a pile of bones. The kid was, the pants, the denim vest, his shorts, the Nikes.
Mm-hmm.
And next to the grave was, there was a black spot on the ground where the body, they had just dumped the body there and they let it lay there for 10 days before the burial. So the corpse wasn't in good shape. Let's put it that way. The blood had drained, the body went into the earth, and, and then, the worms got to all the bad stuff. So, but as this was happening, as I said, at least 20, 30 teenagers and adults heard about the murder. The story started getting around. So when the cops went out there, they got the skeleton and, started to do the police started to investigate. And then they found out the trail leads them to Ricky Casso and another fellow, Jimmy Troiano, who was 18, both of whom, were living on the streets. They were bad kids, They were found sleeping in the car. And this was this Ricky Casso who had come to visit me and was asking me, grilling me about Amityville. So, and Casso, so he was arrested and charged with the murder for reasons that only the police know. And so was this fellow, Jimmy Troiano, who was 18. Casso had a death wish. So they didn't put the camera on him, just sort of like Epstein. He was they didn't do a suicide watch on him at the time. And he hung himself in jail before his trial was going to start in July.
Yeah.
Jimmy Troiano did go to trial, but he was acquitted. He's just really written a book about it. But it was kind of creepy the way this guy had showed up at my office, because he knew of my involvement with Amityville and was asking about the devil. And at this point, I didn't know who he was. He hadn't committed the crime yet.
There's almost some people out there that would say, maybe another fallen one to the Amityville allure, just it just seemed to have had that reputation to just attract, broken people.
Well, it does. And even today on Facebook, there are so many forums that are devoted to Amityville and the DeFeos, and one of them has 50,000 followers. And there are some people on there who have gone over the edge with the obsession. And it's quite frankly very off-putting and scary.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point they want to know the minutia of everything about the DeFeo murders. There's one person there who got banned for only 30 days on one of these forums, who has a really morbid interest in Dawn DeFeo and what happened. Then somebody went online and managed to poked around on the internet and managed to find the photos of the bodies of the DeFeo, the murdered DeFeos, while they were
strange obsession.
While they were in, the bed, and of course the police were taking the pictures. So there are some pictures, I don't think that they should be posted, but everybody's saying, well, you can find them on the internet, but it's still very disrespectful. There's one photo out there of Louise DeFeo, where she's naked and you can see, her genitals.
It's not fitting, it's just
no, it isn't.
Fitting.
But people in the, and then they're asking all sorts of very, what I think are bizarre questions.
So it seems as though Amityville still has this long reach. What I wanted to ask you about that, and then I'm going to just, we have a question that I want to merge with it, and then
Yes.
we can kind of go. Do you think that people, much like have created a tulpa effect with this, like Slender Man is a tulpa created in a gaming chat room, and people gave it so many characteristics that there started being sightings of this thing. Do you think that maybe the obsession with Amityville has created some sort of a tulpa effect, being, because the owners who've lived there after that are kind of like, well, we are not, but it's like we talked about as well. Maybe some people just don't feel it, or is it that maybe whatever it was it somebody maybe cleared the place, whatever the case may be. Do you think that people projecting so much thought in there have been keeping this thing going, this energy alive? Yes, and Helen, that's what I'm saying. It's not real. It was created in a chat room, and I am making an example here in communicating. There we go.
Well, yes, I think some people can have powerful energies, and the thread that I have seen through my life, like watching my mother and going into, you know, my neighbor's parents' haunted house
Yeah.
that had been quiet for a while. My mother went in there and bang, 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 bang. You can see that in even movies.
Yes, like we created it, correct.
Like Hill House, somebody who's sensitive, who didn't know that they were sensitive, all of a sudden they go in and things start happening to them. Or if there is negative energy there, whether you want to call it a ghost, whether you want to call it a disembodied spirit, demonic, or
you made
bad
mention
energy.
of poltergeist activity. That is projected energy. That's a people projected energy, right? Like that grows over time. Much like I say with the tulpa effect, it's sort of like people focus so much energy on one location that they can actually manifest energy, like create a whole other type of energy being there, because it just seems like the weird obsession with that. And where I wanted to go with it was a question, where we can maybe tie into the same idea, which came in. It goes, what do you think about Annabelle? Because some people seem to think the same idea.
Okay,
So I thought,
let me tell you about Annabelle, okay? Because
Yeah.
that's topical for
I've
right
met
now.
Annabelle. Yeah, I've met
So
Annabelle.
that gentleman who just asked, what do I think about Annabelle?
Yeah.
I will tell you, and again, I'm a reporter, I'm a practical person by nature. I do believe in the supernatural. I do believe in life after death, but I also feel, as you've just said, people can project these things. It's easy to spook yourself. The field attracts a lot of charlatans.
Yeah.
Okay, but so I stayed friends with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Okay.
Mhm.
And Annabelle was not, that doll is creepy. And there is something with that doll. So let me just tell you about my experience
I've
with this
met her.
doll.
Yeah.
Okay. At the time, back in the 70s, Ed and Lorraine had their museum down there, but they didn't have all, they were collecting things as they went along.
Yeah.
Annabelle was not in
a case,
a glass case. They had it out. So I went up there. It was 1978. I went up there in the summertime, one day to have lunch with them. And they lived in the same house all their married life. It was a two-family house. And sometimes they had a tenant, what have you, but a lot of time it was just them. And the daughter and son-in-law and grandson were not living there.
Yeah.
So Annabelle, they had a sitting room. Their house is very cute in Monroe, Connecticut. They have a sitting room.
It's a cute house.
Yeah, they have a sitting room in the back. Okay, when you come in the front door, they have a sitting room, like a living room there, and then you go into the kitchen area. But there was another sort of parlor off to the back. Yes. And Annabelle was in it before we went to lunch. Annabelle was in a chair in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And they always said, don't look at Annabelle, don't go over to it. And like a little Raggedy Ann doll, nothing like what you see in the Conjuring movie or Annabelle.
No, it's different. Yeah.
Okay, it's very different. Don't look at it because they had said it was possessed by the spirit of, this little girl. And they said they were protected. They knew how to protect themselves, etc., and wasn't really a threat. But, you look at the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we go out to lunch, come back, and we go back into the sitting room to talk some more. And now Annabelle is not in that corner chair. Now she's on the couch.
And there was nobody in the house.
There was nobody else in the house, no. Okay. And by the way, Ed, Lorraine, and I all left at once. So it wasn't like neither one of them said, oh, wait, I forgot something and I have to go back into the house. So they were not staging anything for my benefit. So I go back and Annabelle is on the couch. I said, hey, wait a second. Wasn't that doll? How did the doll get from here to there? And they said, well, she moves sometimes on her own. It's like, when I told this to some of my friends, they said, oh no, I would be out of there. So I'm like, okay, so I'm a little disconcerted, but it's a sunny day in July. So, lights are on, other people are there. I'm not really getting too concerned. Anyway, so we're chatting and, you're moving back and forth. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. And damn, didn't that doll cross its legs? So I stand up and I said, hey, because I wanted to go over. My first instinct was I stood up, went on, wanted to go over to see if, hey, are there wires here? What's going on? How is this happening?
Yes.
Yes. And they said, no, don't go near her. And I was looking at, at the thing, but it's one of those things where you don't want to, necessarily.
You don't want to acknowledge it.
Mess with it, get in its face and down, hey, how did you do that? Or shake a leg. Yeah. But so I know, even if somebody says, well, somebody could have come in there and moved it. I saw that thing cross its legs, and it had been just sitting there before, like a regular, regular Raggedy Ann doll that it was with the legs out. So what do I think of Annabelle? I think there is something with there Annabelle. Because and it was one of those things where after I saw it, you start saying to yourself, did I just see what I thought I saw?
Yeah.
And you question yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
And a lot of people will do that, but I know that I saw that, and that was creepy. So now with all of the stuff about Annabelle, I mean, there are people right now who firmly believe that even with, Annabelle under glass, that fire down in New Orleans.
Yes.
With Annabelle.
And Dan.
And now Dan Rivera.
I remember meeting Dan. He was brand new to NESPR. And, like I said, when I was there, it treated me like royalty. They were just amazing to me. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm just new to the team. And it was just so, there was just so much anticipation for what was coming. And he was just so excited. And we shared paranormal war stories, so to speak, about, over dinner and stuff. And, and people are connecting the two together. And who knows?
I don't know. Well, the only thing I've heard recently, Dan was what, 52, 54?
Yeah, he's young, yeah.
And he has 4 children.
Yeah, he's a wife and dad first,
Which is terrible for them.
Yes.
And they said he was found in the hotel room, deceased, but that the doll wasn't, the coroner was forced to make a statement to the press saying, no, the doll was not in the room with him. But if you believe that the doll is possessed and has some sort of malevolent force, then one could easily think that something could have happened. And I don't know what the cause of it. I don't know.
You're in really haunted Gettysburg to start with, but I think that moving her around as such, has raised a lot of concern. But can you really lock something down of that this apparent magnitude under glass in a box kind of thing? Some people are saying never should have left her alone, and it's like, could it have gotten out? But my question is how did it go from being haunted by a child to becoming something? Was it always something maybe mimicking a child? Lorraine was pretty in tune. So if she said it was a child, it was a child. But how did it turn into something so aggressive?
That's a very good question. There's an episode of The Twilight Zone with Telly Savalas, who played Kojak. And
I
it was
remember.
about Talkie Tina.
Yeah.
It was a talking doll. And they brought the doll home, and it was a little girl's doll, and it liked the little girl, but it didn't like Telly Savalas, who was the child's stepfather.
Yeah.
And it kept getting more aggressive, and it would say to him, "My name is Talkie Tina, and I don't like you." And then
remember
it said,
so
and finally
creepy.
said, "I'm going to kill you." And the doll was the way Telly Savalas gets it is that he trips over the doll on the stairs and falls down the stairs and breaks its neck.
Yeah.
But then it starts talking to the girl's mother. After
Yeah.
that happened, the girl's mother realizes, okay, this something with this
Doll.
doll.
Yeah.
And because the doll Talkie Tina is saying to her, "I'm Talkie Tina, and you better be nice to me."
I remember that episode.
Yes,
It's creepy when
it
little
is.
dolls talk.
Yeah,
and
so
move around by
creepy.
themselves. Yeah.
I have to say,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be taking this doll on the road like this.
Mm.
It can just stir things up. You don't know what energy is out there. I do think there is something with that doll.
Mm-hmm.
It was not always under
Well,
glass.
when I
And
was
I think
there,
some people can trigger it.
yeah, I agree with you. When I was there, somebody took a picture, and it's fairly dark down there. It's not super well lit, but it's lit enough you don't have to use a flash for the pictures, right? And as I was walking away from it, someone took a picture of her, and it looked like, because they're button eyes, but
Yes.
it looked like there was light, and they were looked like they were watching in my direction as I was walking away. I remember showing it to Tony, and he's like, "Wow," I said, "Stupid little biatch," because I knew it was still in there, and I was kind of like, "Oh," But it was a weird photograph, and I thought, God, that's a little unnerving, if that's the case, because I'm just standing looking at the next attraction, like looking at the next items from where she was just in the regular case back then. So I'm just moving along and I'm just still checking things out. And somebody just happened to snap a photo and said, "Oh, this is what, like looking in your direction at whatever it was you were doing." I'm just like, so yeah, I felt a little strange.
Yeah, I remember when the night of the seance, what I was the one who dubbed it the psychic slumber party on March 6th, going into
Mhm.
the Amityville house. Saying to my father was poo-pooing everything. He says, "Listen,
Yeah. Yeah.
if any spirits show up, ask them for the winning numbers in the lottery."
That's
My
a
mother,
bad
but
thing to say. Yeah.
my mother was,
Mm.
I said, "What do you think about all of this?" Because she had talked to George Lutz on the phone, and she said to me, "I think you'll be okay, Laura. I don't think, and I always had the feeling,
Yeah.
this is from my gut,
Mhm.
when I went into Amityville, that whatever was or wasn't there was not interested in me
Yeah. Yeah.
until that day that I went in with my alone with my German Shepherd,
Mhm.
Fritz,
Yeah.
and the dog sensed something. Now,
Mhm.
people can make things up, but my dog, nobody he doesn't read the newspapers. He didn't know
Mhm. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
6 people had been violently murdered there. So when he was, growling and stuff, and I started to go up the stairs, I then enough of what he was feeling communicated itself to me and was saying, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So, and I think in many of those things, if there is latent energy and you decide I'm going to start messing with it,
yeah,
you can inadvertently.
Yeah, it's almost like you got a little nudge, to say like, I'm still here, just,
But
and
with,
your dog was, saying, follow my lead, don't do it,
well, the dog wasn't moving to go up the
Yeah.
stairs. He was standing stock still. My dog Fritz sensed something that I
Yeah,
couldn't sense.
exactly.
He saw something because his gaze was fixed on one
Yes.
point. He did
Yes.
not move, and all the hackles were up on from his neck to his tail.
Yes.
Oh. And I had
Yeah.
never seen him act like that before. I never saw him act like that again.
Yeah. So
And he
that's
was,
definitely something.
he was a very protective dog
Yeah.
because he had, run down the stairs at my grandmother's house when her landlord's son was coming in, and he was wearing a beard and he hadn't recognized the son. And the dog charged down the stairs after him, thinking, okay, this is an intruder. And by the way, this dog was mild-mannered Clark Kent type. He
Yeah.
loved everybody. So the fact that he was having that reaction and not moving. So if there were an animal in the house, or if there was a person in the house that he could smell, because dogs' olfactory senses are
Well,
about
I've
100.
owned a shepherd as well. Yeah.
Yes, 150 times
Yeah.
keener
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
yours and mine as a human. So that was weird. But I think it is not true, by the way. I keep hearing this. Oh, all of the other people who've lived in the house, from the Cromartys on, and Brian Wilson and this one and that one, to the current people.
I
None
didn't
of
know
them have.
Brian Wilson lived in the house. That's pretty cool, actually.
Well, not Brian Wilson of the Beach
Oh,
Boys.
different. Oh, okay.
No,
I
this
was
is
gonna
just,
say, wow.
this is, but I think what happened, it's not true that none of them experienced anything.
Yeah.
What they say publicly and what you hear behind the scenes. For example, I have spoken to a couple of the former owners, and at one point, going back about 10, 12 years ago, I had called up the owners who were living there, and I was working on a potential TV series that didn't come to fruition. But Gene Simmons of Kiss was going to be the host of the thing.
That would have been awesome.
So,
yeah.
and he wanted to explore the Amityville thing. So the producers got in touch with me and said, hey, would you be involved? And blah, blah, blah. And so I had called up the husband and wife, spoke to them, and they said, no, we don't want anybody to come in. And, they have been interviewed in the New York Times, as many of the former owners have been, and said, look, this is a tired, and this person that I spoke to said, this is a tired old ghost story.
Yeah.
Okay. Just like the New York Times said, there's nothing going on here. And they didn't want anybody coming in. And they said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, we were going to, get Danny Lutz and come in. And all of a sudden, this person who I've been having a very nice civil conversation with them, this person lets out a stream of expletives. Danny Lutz, that little blah, 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 blah. It was he and I've never let him. It was he and George. They're the ones that brought the darkness into this house. And I would never let Danny in.
Wow.
Again, because he could bring it back.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, wait a second. 30 seconds before.
Yeah.
You were just saying that it was a tired old ghost story and there was nothing to it. And it was, made up.
Yeah.
So, and then there was a realtor who had gone in, two realtors who had gone in, sell the house, and they felt something creepy in the basement and said, let's get out of here. And the one person then disavowed it, but the other fellow did go on the record and was interviewed about it, and said, no, he felt distinctly at odds. Now, it's always possible, by the way.
Yeah.
that you can spook yourself, even in broad daylight.
Easily.
So there's that. The imagination and the mind is a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, so I believe that people can project things and manifest things
Well, people are
with that
powerful
energy.
just with intention. Look at psychokinesis, look at telekinesis. That's just through projection of energy. So if you have people on a mass scale who are projecting energy to one direction with this huge obsession, you can only imagine how that would be feeding anything, anything that may already be there, or it just you can make things manifest just
Exactly.
through that.
And we have seen that. I mean, for
Yeah.
instance, Uri Geller, again,
Yeah.
would tell people, okay, I'm going to be, bending spoons at this
Mhm.
time. I want all of you in the,
Mhm.
around here who are tuning in
Yeah.
to concentrate and see if you can bend spoons. And then you would see this mass, people were saying, yes, yes, I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
look at some of the Marian apparitions.
Yeah.
Fatima in 1917.
Mm.
The Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to the three peasant children in Portugal, in what was the one girl's father's, field. And this had been going on for several months. And the Blessed Virgin Mary told the three children,
Mhm.
okay, because they were getting a lot of pushback from people
Mhm.
who said that they were making things up and there wasn't anything happening,
Mhm.
but the crowds kept coming. So she said, come October 13th, I am going to perform a miracle
Yeah. Yeah.
so that everybody will believe it. And this was written up in the New York Times. There were 70,000 people who
Mhm. Who showed up?
congregated at Fatima.
Yeah.
And on that day, and supposedly it had been a very rainy, stormy day, torrential downpours, muddy stuff.
Mm.
And the crowd was there. Most people couldn't see anything. They heard, if you were up close, you might have heard a little humming or saw a
Mhm.
shadow.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, the miracle was that was, and the crowd, you could say it was mass hysteria, for 70,000 people were there,
Mhm.
except people from miles away who were nowhere near that field in Fatima
Mhm.
saw the sun apparently come out of its orbit, and it looked like it was going to crash into the earth. And so mass hysteria, people were down on their knees praying because they thought this was the end of the world.
Mhm.
And at the end of it,
Mhm.
sun came out, everything was fine. But you look at the accounts of that day,
Yeah.
and there was a
The
lot of
mass
prayer
energy.
going on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that energy. So yes,
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
definitely think that there's something there. I
Yeah.
mean, and you look, but a lot of times people who are a little off,
Mhm.
if you've been doing drugs or evil
That
or,
that tends
you
to
know,
open you up to things as well. It makes you a really easy target, which brings me to the Conjuring house, 'cause
yes. And I was just going there too. Yeah.
okay, yeah, we've got another, like, 20 to 30 minutes left, so do you wanna tackle that one? The Conjuring
Yeah.
house.
I actually went into the Conjuring house with Ed and Lorraine Warren
Right. Yeah.
initially, and I did see um some that house is sort of creepy. First of all, I have to tell you, when I went in there, I was
Yeah.
scared that I was going to fall through the floors.
Oh, boy.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that house, it's a typical old 1800
Farmhouse.
farmhouse.
Yeah.
Small rooms,
Yeah.
the floors are not level. They have not done a lot of upgrades to it,
Mhm.
or they hadn't when I was in there. So the floor, they've got an earthen type cellar
Mhm.
in there, steep steps going down to the cellar, low ceilings,
Mhm.
but the floorboards are worn out. I was afraid I was going to crash and, end up in the basement.
Mhm.
Uh, the cabinets are old in some cases, so you could understand how some things would open and close on their own.
Mhm.
The rooms are small,
Mhm.
but when I went in there and Ed and Lorraine were doing the seance, not the seance, but they were,
Mm-hmm. Doing their
trying to,
walkabout.
no,
Communication.
they actually had, the mother was there, Caroline, who was a beautiful, beautiful woman. She just
Mm,
died recently,
mm,
and
yeah.
a beautiful woman. She could have, been a model. But
Mhm,
whatever happened, whatever was in there, and
mm,
they talk about in the books how they believe it's a portal to other dimensions, and there's a lot of things going on there.
mhm,
But in one instance, one of the entities or spirits was jealous of the mother because they were in love with the father,
mm,
the husband. And I saw the mother flung across the room.
mhm. Yeah,
I
like
was
that.
sitting I was sitting in the back, and the father was very, very upset and called a halt to it and wanted Ed and Lorraine to leave. But the mother and the one sister had borne the brunt of,
Mhm.
these physical
Disadvantage.
attacks. And
Yeah.
I do recall the mother, Caroline, telling us that, because the father was a truck driver, long haul truck driver, and was away a lot during the week. And one thing that wasn't in the movies or in the books that I do recall, and I had spoken to uh, the daughter about it. I said, "Yeah, I remember your mother telling me that she cut into an orange one day and blood spurted out."
Mhm.
And she said, "Yeah, because when she went on TV and was being interviewed when the movie first came out in 2012, 2013,
Mm.
and she was doing a lot of interviews, and they asked her, I was watching her on CBS Sunday Morning, or one of the Sunday morning shows, and they said, did all of this stuff really happen to you? And she said, oh, was it as bad as it was depicted in the movies? Because of course movies amp things up and
Well, it's ratings,
engage,
right? Yeah.
yeah, engage in a lot of hyperbole. And she said the movies didn't even begin to touch on it. It was worse. And that, they lived there for 10 years, but yet she went back into the house when it was sold, by that one couple who wasn't living there, but they were also
Mm.
hosting, letting people go in, and stay there for money. And
Oh boy, when that place got sold and opened up, it was like every researcher and every show, paranormal show under the sun filmed there. A new place came on the block, and that was it. Everybody got in there. I
I
remember
know.
that. I remember
And
that. An influx of Conjuring house television segments.
yes, exactly,
Mhm.
but, um, and this last one has been disastrous. It was shut down because too much was going on with the
Yeah.
person who bought it.
Mhm.
But I do think when you have people who are so obsessed with the thing or so intent
Mhm.
on pushing a narrative, they think that they can control it, and whatever happens,
Mm. Yeah.
they don't have the tiger by the tail, it has them.
Yeah. Yeah, you had mentioned that also about Amityville as well,
Yes. Well,
with
with
George.
George Lutz, he
Yeah.
was he was trying
Yeah.
to control the narrative, and there's no way,
Mhm.
once you come out with a story like that, that you're gonna be able to control the media and the message. Um, Ed and Lorraine also said you had to be careful around George because he was very touchy.
Mhm.
And I remember the first night that I introduced the Warrens to the Lutzes, and
Mhm.
they were at Kathy's mother's house.
Mhm.
And I had told them the way I got the exclusive on that story was by saying, hey, you really need to be dealing with some reputable paranormal investigators. And
Mhm.
the Warrens are very controversial. A lot of people say, oh, it's all made up, they cause trouble, etc. Now, I will say that Ed and Lorraine, there were a lot of things that they they didn't solve. They didn't
Mhm.
solve anything at Amityville when we
No.
had that seance.
Mhm.
Nothing was solved there. In fact,
Mhm.
Lorraine during the seance said when she was in the light trance, there's going to be, a priest or a monk who's going to come in and he'll be able to be the one that cleansed the house. And of course, that didn't happen. And they were talking about having maybe an exorcism in the house after that seance, but nothing ever came of that. So the
Mhm.
Warrens were in the house twice, but I had told the Lutzes, you really need to be dealing with reputable paranormal investigators, not
Mhm.
self-styled vampirologists
Mhm.
and people coming up,
Mhm.
and
Everybody wanted in that place. That's the
yes,
problem. Everybody came out of the woodwork.
yes, but what happened was, unbeknownst to us, George behind the scenes was calling up all of just about every paranormal investigator he could think of doing this crash course,
Mhm.
trying to get people like Dr. Osis, Alex Tannhaus coming in from the New York School for Parapsychology. Then he called up um, the folks from the Dream Lab
Mhm.
who were on the Duke University campus and
Mhm. Yeah.
um, loosely affiliated with them,
Mhm.
Jerry Salvin, who brought in a couple of neophyte researchers, but he didn't tell us that he was doing it that night. So that was so chaotic
Yeah.
that night.
Mhm.
And then Ed and Lorraine brought a couple of people, psychics,
Mhm.
um, Mary Pascarella,
Mhm.
Downey, Alberta Riley. She was there with her husband. So it was like a party.
Yeah.
But what was going to happen if this were today?
Mhm.
Everything would be scripted. You would have a plan, but there was no one producer. George never told us about all the other people that he invited. The Warrens never said, hey, we're bringing people along.
Yeah.
So the thing got out of hand and it descended into nobody was really in charge the
Yeah.
way you see things today.
Mhm.
Now, when I went in 8 months later
Mhm.
with Hans Holzer, Hans always had his agenda set. He
Well,
knew
he's
what he was.
organized.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was very organized. He
Yeah.
had Ethel Johnson Myers there, and I had done research for him on that book. He declined. He was the first person I called
Yeah.
to come in and do that thing with Channel 5, and he wanted to be paid to do it. He
Mhm.
wanted a budget. He wanted to do an hour documentary as what he had with the
Mhm.
Cafe Bazaar
Yeah.
7 or 8 years earlier. And I
Mhm.
said, no, I said, unfortunately, Hans, I'd love to do that, but we're the news department. We're not the entertainment division. So we can't do that. And he says, oh, it's just a simple haunting. And he poo-pooed it. And he said, well, if I'm not getting paid, I'm not going out there because at that point it wasn't that famous.
Yeah.
Fast forward after the story blew up and he wanted in on it. And then he called me up and unbeknownst to me, and again, I'm 20 years old, 21 years old at the time.
Mhm.
He was trying to get, another book deal. He contacted William Weber. And
Mhm.
so when I showed up that day in January, it was January 13th, 1977, the house was empty.
Mhm.
And I was very surprised to see William Weber there.
Mhm. Hmm.
And the house was totally empty. Hans Holzer's camera, his video camera, froze up. He says,
Mhm.
well, it's never happened before. And Ethel went into a deep trance. And that's when she felt the spirit of the Native American
Mhm.
who was upset because kids had found his skull and were kicking it around like a football.
Mm.
So a lot of people, by the way, the Amityville Historical Society, when I first started researching it, they I had gone out there, and again, you have to look at a time we didn't have mobile
Yeah,
phones.
that's right.
You had fax machines, you had a copier machine.
Yeah.
their copier machine wasn't working, but I had gotten some of the articles about that being, bodies of Native Americans had been found there. And these articles dated back to 1895, 1905, that had appeared in the local newspapers.
Wow.
That when they were, and right on that spot, that when they were actually going to dig a root cellar, they found the bodies of 4 Native Americans. Now, Native Americans were all over Long Island.
Right.
And the different tribes moved around. They traded, they intermarried just the same way as, you might hook up with somebody who's 3 towns over from you and,
Yeah, of course.
whatever. So, but the notion of an Indian burial ground, they were denying that for years until the articles resurfaced and proved it. But when you think of an Indian burial ground, it's not like a cemetery the way we think of cemeteries. The Native Americans, they, lived close to the water because it was a food source. Bathing.
Yeah. They always settled along the waterways for the most part.
Yes, they did. And of course, it was also a means of transportation with the canoes and things like this. And so, but it wasn't a separate burial ground the way we think of cemeteries today. As a matter of fact, right here in my town, where I live now in central Massachusetts, we do have an Indian reservation. It's the oldest one in New England. Right near me. It's only 4 acres, and they have ceremonies. They're having a ceremony, I think, this coming weekend. But there's also an actual Indian burial ground just a mile from my house, where they have the sign out where it was it's an actual thing. That is not what you had at Amityville. So, but everybody was trying to do a different take on it, so, and then Hans came up when I was very surprised to see William Weber there. I didn't find out until later that Hans had contacted William Weber because he wanted to get access to Ronnie DeFeo, who was in jail, and do the story from the perspective that the devil made him do it. And of course, William Weber had been trying to get an appeal for Ronnie DeFeo Jr., Butch, as he was known in the family, on the grounds that he was possessed. And Ronnie DeFeo Jr., he was deemed fit to stand trial. You had dueling psychologists and psychoanalysts positing things, but Ronnie wouldn't know the truth if it came and hit him in the face. He told so many stories. And then he would recant them and say, no, I just did that for this, or etc. So,
well, I mean, if you go with, let's theorize for a moment that maybe he had an attachment. There's many, serial killers that have been investigated by psychics to see, did they have attachments at the time? It doesn't mean full possession. What it means within attachments, it's like little puppet masters, but they can step out of the arena at any time, even temporarily. So then, the person who essentially is a vessel attached, this possession is not that common. Really it isn't. Attachments are very common, and something steps out, and then Ronnie's completely coherent, for example. So, and then he's like, well, I don't remember, because when the attachment comes in, all of a sudden the manipulation and the thinking is taking place.
Well, I think he was evil. I think he was amoral. He never expressed any remorse for what he had done. I mean, other than the letters that he would write to his grandfather, but that was that was very calculated on his part, because he didn't want the grandfather to kill him. His one aunt on his father's side, his Aunt Phyllis, who is still alive, lovely, lovely woman. She really wanted to believe that he didn't do this.
Yeah.
And
It's a tough go, you know.
she kept in touch with
Yeah.
him. And
Yeah.
it's a sad situation, but
Mhm.
he never expressed any
Yeah.
remorse.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people have focused on, oh, the father, Ronald DeFeo Sr., was very abusive. But you put that in the context of the time, and he was
Mm.
more like an Archie Bunker character. Not that there probably wasn't some abuse, and not
Yeah.
that he didn't get into
Mhm.
fisticuffs with
Mhm.
Ronnie Jr. And I
Yeah.
mean, they were putting on a show for the neighbors, you know, they were wrestling at some point out on the side lawn,
Yeah.
you know, kids, but I think he was evil.
Mhm.
I think, and they had problems with him because
Mhm.
going back to when he was 9,
Yeah.
they sent him to a psychiatrist when he was 9. And that at the time was not something middle or upper middle class Italian families
No, but if you've got an
did
aggressive
normally.
parent, for example, that doesn't help either.
No, it doesn't. But I think
Yeah.
all of these things
Yeah, combined. Yeah.
factor in. And I
Yeah.
think if you look at it, he was consumed by greed.
Yes.
And he
Mhm.
did not have any
Yeah.
type of a moral compass.
Mhm.
Really,
Mhm.
I think he was amoral.
So it would
Um,
have made him a perfect target.
yes, he was. So yes,
Yeah.
do I think that could have been exploited
Yeah.
in there? Yes. I mean, greed is one of the 7 capital sins, and if you do
Yeah.
believe in the devil,
Yes.
and yes, that could be
Yeah.
exploited. Do I think that he was possessed like what we saw in The Exorcist? A
Yeah.
full,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it is very possible that that was what was going on there. Judge Thomas Stark, who sentenced him
Mhm.
and who would, you know, presided over the trial there,
Mhm.
he has a book out on that, and I have the book, and I had interviewed him at the time. He was chosen because he was tough but fair. They didn't
Yeah.
want somebody who was going to be swayed. And when he sentenced Ronnie,
Mhm.
he basically said, he sentenced him to 6 consecutive life sentences,
Mhm.
25 years to life. Um, and he said, I can't control what happens after me, but I would strongly suggest that he not be paroled because he will represent a danger to society. So he
Mhm.
didn't believe Judge Thomas Stark
Yeah.
that he clearly didn't believe that this
Let
Ronnie DeFeo Jr. was going to be capable of being rehabilitated. Now, what interested me about that when he did the book and I spoke to him, his book is about 140 pages long, and half of the book is about the DeFeo murders. And the title of the chapter that deals with Ronnie DeFeo is The Antisocial Son. And I remember saying to the judge, I said, don't you think that's really minimizing and downplaying? I said, to me, antisocial is
Mhm.
somebody who goes to a party and doesn't like to talk, or somebody who doesn't
Mhm.
like to go to parties and is something of a what he did. You know,
Mhm.
I think when you kill 6 people,
Mhm. Yeah.
that's you've you know jumped the shark,
Yeah.
crossed the you know
Yeah. No,
the continental
absolutely.
divide when it comes to antisocial son. But it just goes to show
Mm.
that
Mhm.
a lot of these things do exist.
The well, they do, and a lot of serial killers have been, reputed to have leaned towards, like the satanic side or the occult and things like that. The whole devil made me do it sort of thing, you know, it was probably just an old line that was often been used. But
Mhm.
all I'm saying is attachments don't have to be right like on top of you. They could be literally down the street. They could be literally in another room. They
Yes.
manipulate the energy, they manipulate the behavior. If you're depressed, they'll make you more depressed. If you're not, maybe they'll make you depressed. They'll give you anxiety, like anything. If you come in with all of that and you're a drug addict and a boozer,
Exactly.
right? You have a bullseye on your back, you're easy to manipulate.
Yes.
Right.
Or
So,
you're very, very sensitive. We've
yes,
seen that in a lot of the movies,
we
like the
have.
haunting of, Hill House and
Yes,
things like that.
exactly.
Somebody who's sensitive
Yes.
without even knowing it. And I have seen
Yeah.
this time and time again,
Yes,
that some
exactly.
people just
Yeah.
do not realize that they're sensitive to it. It's like somebody who has an allergy. You don't realize, oh,
Mhm.
I can go into anaphylactic shock
Mhm.
from a
Yeah.
bee sting until you get stung.
Until
Or I
yeah,
have an
exactly.
allergy to peanuts or strawberries or
Yeah,
whatever until it happens. And
exactly.
I've seen that as well,
Yeah. No, 100%, 100%.
and the people who really I have met, like Vicky Monroe,
Mhm.
who has a powerful gift, they
Mhm.
have to learn, not just Vicky, but other people like her,
Mhm.
have done their own self
Yeah.
putting up a wall of armor around them to protect
You have to
themselves.
yeah, you have to ground and you have to be prepared for anything that comes to you, there's the reflection of energy, being able to spin things around to keep things that direct their energy towards you, even with people. Even with people. People can cause you a lot of strife with
Yes,
energy.
they can. So now let me ask you, what did you feel when you were in, just for starters, when you were in Ed and Lorraine's museum there? I mean, obviously you
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
about Annabelle and
yeah.
somebody took a picture, but did you feel or sense anything?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of blended energies in there, and I think a lot of it also came from the various. Because in her later years, when she started slowly handing the reins over to Tony, and they were traveling together and doing the events after Ed's passing, they were having larger events with larger groups of people coming into the home, and you come in with people who are investigators who may be at other locations, things attach, things come in, things, mindsets, a whole lot. There was a whole blend of energies in there. Absolutely.
And you think sometimes those things can collide.
I do. I do
Yeah.
think that. And when you have, other energies that come in with somebody mixing in, let's say, with energies that may be much more aggressive or much older, there's a way that they can either trap that energy or that they can just, amalgamate, I say, like take it in, right? And
Yeah.
that the weaker energies sometimes get caught up there as well. So yeah, there's a
I'm
whole blend
just
of things.
amazed when I've attended some of Vicky Monroe's events.
Mhm,
How and it's like watching
mhm.
um that movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore,
Ghost. Yeah,
Ghost,
yeah,
and the Whoopi Goldberg
yeah,
character
yeah,
doesn't know she's working as a psychic, but she's
yeah.
faking it. But then all of a sudden she realizes, oh,
Bing.
I really
Yeah,
do this. My mother had the gift, my
yes,
aunt had the gift, my grandmother had the gift. And
yeah,
then she starts hearing things.
yeah,
But when you have people who are powerful psychics who can tune into things,
yes.
what happens to Vicky is just like that scene from Ghost, where
Mhm,
when Whoopi Goldberg discovers she has a real gift and
mhm,
people are coming to the house and you can see all the spirits lined up
mhm.
to
Yeah,
come into her, to impart messages to
mhm.
their still living
Yeah, I know.
relatives and wives and girlfriends, whatever. Um, and somebody actually jumps in. They didn't want to wait, and they come into her, and it's like,
Yeah,
whoa.
it's like
Well,
bing.
well,
Yeah,
Vicky had that happen to her.
yes.
She was reading for a woman whose
Mhm,
mother had died of a brain aneurysm,
mhm,
and the mother came through. And I remember Vicky telling me, and the deceased mother, the spirit,
mm,
wanted to actually show Vicky, wanted her to feel what the brain aneurysm felt like.
mhm.
And I don't know if she actually came into her, but Vicky actually felt the explosion. And Vicky said she had headaches and a migraine for a week. So when she goes out into crowds,
Yeah, you have to be careful.
okay, she puts on sunglasses and a hat. That's like
Yeah.
her protective armor
Yeah.
because,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, it's quite easy. Grounding is always the best thing you could do. It just makes it a lot harder for things to attach. And I'm sure she's got her own methods of grounding and, holding on to what she's got for dear life.
that's true. So for somebody
Yeah.
like yourself,
Mhm.
how have your gifts evolved as
Mhm.
you've gotten older? I mean, because
Mhm.
you
Well,
can sort of start testing these things and then you find you
mhm,
can do this or do that. I mean, I saw it with my mom,
mhm.
where she started fessing up to she could, she was actually
I've always been able to do it. I just think as I got older, I got wiser, and when you get wiser, you realize that you have a certain amount of due diligence, and with that being said, you use your abilities, should I say, smartly. So, yeah, I don't know. It's for me, they've always been there. I find now I have more that comes to me, especially like sometimes I'll just be researching and I'm just shown things, I'm given things, and it's like, okay, and I'll be starting on one thing, and if I'm all of a sudden I'm somewhere completely different, that I'm just guided around because I'm calmer with myself, I'm more relaxed. So I just let the energy flow in. Sometimes I'll blap something off, somebody's talking to me, I'll go blah 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 blah, and I won't even remember it. I'm just like, if you're meant to hear it and it just comes out of my face, doesn't necessarily mean that it's meant for me and I'm ever going to remember saying it to you. It's things
yes.
like that, right? And that's just the way it is for me.
Well, I've been very surprised, with myself
Mhm.
getting more and more of these things.
Yeah.
Hi, Karai. Getting more and more of these impulses, do this, and
Yeah.
they are always panning out. The other thing
Mhm.
I find, I'm an animal lover, and you watch animals and the way that they can communicate
Yeah.
and sense things. So I always make sure if I'm doing one of these things, I've got my German shepherds with me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But I've even become able to, in a rudimentary sense,
Yeah.
communicate with my animals, not,
Mhm.
I mean, and
Yeah.
some of that, they pick up on us and you can see their
Sure.
expressions. You
Yeah.
don't have to be an animal communicator to figure out
Yeah.
what what they're doing, but I always trust my animals' instincts, my horses, my dogs,
Mhm.
and watch, and
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't fail you there.
No, it
I will
does not.
say a
It does
funny thing that happened, my family, we always had a summer home in Maine.
not. Mhm.
And of course, people knew in the family that my mom
Mhm.
was pretty psychic, and one of my cousins is also psychic. Well,
Mhm.
anyway, I had my cousin, her husband, and at the time their um, kids go up to use the house
Mhm.
in the summer. And I said, "Oh, did you guys have a good time?" And they came back and they said, "Oh, yeah." And my cousin's son, Peter,
Mhm.
who's my first cousin once removed, or second cousin,
Yeah.
however you want to say it, he
Mhm.
was about 18 or 19 at the time.
Mhm.
And so my cousin Mary said to me, yeah, a couple of funny things happened
Yeah.
while we were there.
Yeah.
So the one thing that happened, and my cousin's husband had a can of beer on the table, on
Mhm.
the big dining room table.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the can of beer flew off the table.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was on the edge and it fell off, or somebody knocked
Right.
it, or somebody went by. It
Yeah.
flew off the table. So then
Yeah.
there was a storm that night, and they often have, what happens in the country if you have storms.
Mhm.
Everybody loses power. So, or somebody hits a light, the telephone pole, you lose power, the power line, you lose power.
Mhm.
So every place, our whole road was out.
Mm-hmm.
It was a dark and stormy night. The whole road is out, but the lights in my garage, they said, were flickering on and off. And I remember calling the power company after they told me, I said, is that possible? And they said,
Mm-hmm.
no, not if the whole road is out.
Mm-hmm.
That makes no sense. But
Mm-hmm.
the coup de grace, if you will, on this, when Peter came in and he says, yeah, you won't talk about ghosts, you won't believe what happened. So this is a 2-bedroom cabin. And Peter and I have is a big living room, and I have a queen-sized sofa
Mm-hmm.
with a sofa bed.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter gets the sofa bed,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else gets the bedroom. So
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
it was a dark and stormy night. The lights are out, and it's thundering and lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, he wakes up. Yes, that's
Yeah.
true. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter wakes up and he looks towards the door,
Mm-hmm.
and he sees the figure of a tall, slim woman dressed in
Mm-hmm.
white,
Yeah.
my mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was so shocked, the specter outlined by the door,
Mm-hmm.
that he did what most people do, close
Yeah.
their eyes
Yeah.
tight, open them again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was still there.
Yeah.
And and he swore he saw it, and it was like a figure. And he said, well, he figured it was Aunt Evelyn, my
Mm-hmm.
mother. And so
Yeah.
that wasn't too bad, but he was still scared. And it lingered for a
Mm-hmm.
while.
Yeah.
But I have to laugh because as years have gone by,
Mm-hmm.
he now questions himself and says, oh, did I
Mm-hmm.
really say that? But he was adamant and very sure at the time.
And this is a perfect place for us to end it at 11:11. Woohoo!
11:11. That's a good number.
It's
Thank you,
perfect.
Wayne.
It's
Thank
perfect.
you.
It's perfect. We'll have to pick this up on another segment, I think.
Yes, yes.
This is
We didn't even
fantastic.
get to half of the other things. You didn't hear
We'll,
about the
we'll
investigations in
yeah,
Ireland.
well, we'll have to do a part 2 on this because there's just always just so much stuff to talk about. My God. But the show is only so long. I only have so much airtime. But
I know, right?
but
Well,
that's
hopefully
okay.
everybody enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions, they can shoot them to you, and you can forward
Yeah.
them to me, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, with that being said, thanks to everybody in the chat room. We've had 4 chats, 4 or 5 chats open tonight, and it's been pretty active. So thank you guys all, as always. You have been listening to The Outer Realm with our special guest Laura DiDio, and we have been broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, United Public Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 FM. And thank you to our sponsors, Folgers Coffee, Justin Snicker, Steve McGinnis. We appreciate you all so very much. Tomorrow night, we have a schedule change. So Marilyn Hughes could not make it as she was away last minute, but we have Max Hawthorne coming on, and he's going to be discussing a capture that he received on his CCTV. So his security cameras of what seems to be, I mean, we all hear about these large, crazy cats roaming around, especially, these large black cats. There seems to be a worldwide phenomenon, but, he works in film and he works with film, and he has broken down this segment to bits, and it looks like this cat is a shapeshifter. So that's going to be that. And of course, next Tuesday on Beyond the Outer Realm, Mark Ollie returns for an uncensored show. And it's basically going to be along the lines of who's really running the world. So we're going to get into some crazy, just crazy stuff. Mike's going to talk about a lot of secret societies and just, yeah, I have to leave that right there. Anyway, Thank you all for listening tonight. Thank you, Laura. We will do a part 2. I promise we will, because there is so much more to talk about. And we shall see you guys all tomorrow night. So thank you very much and good night.